Hi everyone, welcome to the next issue in our plant identification series. So today we'll be looking at the Ericaceae family. So let's go through the overview of the family. There are approximately 140 genera and 4,500 species worldwide. There are 2 genera represented in South Africa. About 680 species are in the genus Erica, making it the largest genus in South Africa and in the Cape Floristic region. Of those, 659 species are endemic to the Cape Floristic region, and it's the 4th largest family in the Cape Floristic region. This is quite a unique feature of the Cape Flora, where nowhere else in the world do you find such a large proportion of the flora being in the Ericaceae family. So the Erica genus is really radiated and speciated in the Cape Flora. Okay, so let's look at the basic floral structure of Ericas. So they have rather normal flowers. So they have the outer series, the calyx, and then the corolla. So if you look at the picture on the right hand side, you can see that they have bracts and bracteoles. The shape and the position of these are very important for identification. Sometimes they have a pedicel. Then you have the sepals, which are usually in 4, and then you have the corolla, and these corolla lobes are, or these individual corolla or the petals are fused into a tube or into a bell, or into various shapes. So if we look at the picture on the left hand side, you can see a little bit into the flower. So you can see the corolla lobes and the style exerted in this particular case. Then you can see inside the flower you have the stigma and you have the anthers. And one of the kind of unique features about the Ericaceae family is that they have these pores on the anthers, and sometimes they have these appendages which help in the identification. So you can see in this particular example, the anther ring is still intact, and that means that it hasn't been pollinated yet. If a pollinator has visited a flower, those are usually broken apart and ruffled. So that's a good way to see if a flower has been pollinated or not. Okay, here we have a closer look of inside a Erica flower. So you have your corolla lobes, then you have your anthers, your style, your stigma, and then you can clearly see these anther appendages, which is really important for identification. Okay, so looking at the reproductive parts of the flower, so you have a very basic structure. So you have your ovary, the style and the stigma, and that makes up the female part of the flower. And then you have the filament and the anther, and something to look out for is the pore on the anther, and the anther is in 2 parts, and sometimes they have appendages and sometimes they don't. Okay, so this is just a picture to show that sometimes they have appendages, which is very important for identification. And also what's important is how the filament is joined to the anthers. So either they're joined at the back or at the bottom. So these are really important things to take note of, because Erica is such a huge genus. You will need many characters to be able to get an identification. And then this picture just shows the range of shapes that you can get for the corolla tubes. So they go from globe shapes to elongated tubular shapes, to funnel shape, to long tube shapes. And so there's a huge variety of different forms. And these also help with placing the plant that you are looking at. If you're trying to identify Ericaceae, usually the flower shape, it puts you in a particular group, and so it helps you with identification. Okay, then there are 2 other really key factors that you need to know for Ericaceae. So they have either coralline flowers or calycine flowers. So coralline flowers is where the corolla is taken the display function. So you can see in this picture of Erica margaretaceae, you can see that the corolla has taken the display function and the sepals are quite small, as opposed to this picture of Erica gracilipes, where you can see these the sepals are actually colored and are also part of the display function. So you can see these sepals are really big and colorful. And then another really important thing about the Ericaceae is that you have to notice whether they have 3-nate or 4-nate leaves, and that is just the arrangement of the leaves around the stem. So they either have 3 or they have 4 together, and this is really important for identification. Sometimes it's not easy to work out, but you have to try and just notice whether you have 3-nate or 4-nate combinations. And then usually Ericas have linear leaves that are rolled back, and sometimes the roll is very tight and sometimes it's quite open. In most cases it's very tight like this, and so if you see a plant that you're not sure of, that might not have flowers on, that has the split in the back in the leaves, it's quite likely to be an Erica or in the Ericaceae family. Okay, and then another important thing to note is the shape of the styles. So in many of the wind pollinated species, which are quite hard to identify, you have to take note of what the shape of the style is, and in some species also whether the style is exerted or not exerted. So when you're looking at your Erica species, just have a close look at what shape the actual styles are. Okay, I hope that helped you get some idea of what to look for in the Ericaceae family. So when you're taking photographs, just make sure that you try to get those characters that we spoke about, to get those characters in your picture. Thank you very much. Alright, so let's have a look at Erica flower. So here I've picked one that has a sort of a bell-shaped flower, and the first thing we're going to check is whether it's 3-nate or 4-nate. So if you look at the number of leaves around there, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is a 4-nate example, and remember that sometimes in Erica it can have combos of 3-nate or 4-nate, so don't just look at one stem. Just have a look and see what the most prominent combination is. Then let's move down to the actual flower. So we're just going to zoom in a little bit. These flowers. Okay, so here you can see in this example we have the bracts and the bracteoles over there. So those small little appendages. Then you have your pedicel and your sepals. Those little green parts there are the sepals, and you have your corolla. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 corolla lobes at the end, and those corolla lobes, the shape and the hairiness is really important for identification. And then here we've split out one of the Ericas. So we have the petals, and here you can see they've been fused together. So you basically have 4 petals that are fused together. Then you have the female part of the flower. So there's the ovary, the style, and the stigma. And then you have your anthers, and then that's your filament and your anther over there. And you can see in this example they have anther appendages. So let's see if we can get a little bit closer. Okay, so it's not really easy to see in this example. Maybe in our next flower where we're able to see it more clearly. But there you have your anthers and your filament, and the female part over there. Okay, so here we have another example of an Erica. This is one that has a tubular flower, and I've just separated out the different parts. So we'll have a closer look at that right now. Okay, so here we've separated out the various parts. So you have the pedicel and you have your bracts. Then you have the sepals, 4 sepals. Then the corolla, the petals that are fused into a tube, the corolla tube. Then the male part of the flower, so you have your filament and your anthers. And then the female part of the plant, which you have your ovary, your style, and your stigma. And these little knobs that you see at the base of the flower, those are the nectaries. So that produces the nectar for the flower to attract whatever pollinator is visiting the flowers. Okay, so hopefully you've enjoyed that, and when you see an Erica in the field, please try and get these specific characters to help you with identification.